Arvell Reese from Ohio State, who I'm just labeling him as a weapon. I don't want to call him a linebacker or an edge rusher. You can do whatever you want. He is going to wreak total havoc. Are you buying into this just automatic assumption that he is the best player in the class?
It's a controversial take because, look, you either think that he's a linebacker, an edge, or some type of hybrid in between, right? And if you think that there's one position that's better for him, though, there's one spot that is an incredibly valuable spot, which is an edge rusher, but there's another that is perceived to not be a high important position, again, at linebacker. But for me, Joe, I think he's a linebacker, man. I think he's a linebacker that can do a bunch of sub-rush stuff off the edge, blitz him from in the interior rather than exterior. Like, there's so much that you can do with an Arvell Reese. But when I watch him, I know people are like, the Abdul Carter routes, like Michael Parsons route. When Abdul Carter played linebacker at Penn State, you could tell that it wasn't natural all the time. Like, it just wasn't, right? When Michael Parsons played linebacker at Penn State, even though he's a much better one than Abdul Carter was, it didn't always look natural, right? Like, he wanted to attack all the time. Arvell Reese is incredibly instinctive run defender, keeps gap integrity, can take on blocks at the point of attack, is patient at linebacker too, which is a very underrated thing that we don't talk about enough. So I'm going to say here that the best player in the 2026 NFL draft is a linebacker. People are going to lose their minds. But for me, I want this kid to be Patrick Willis. And then on third downs, I'm letting him be some version of Micah Parsons. Probably not nearly as good as Micah Parsons, but like, I'm letting him be that type of player. I'm gonna pray a creative defensive coordinator gets their hands on Arvell Reese, because if they do, that kid is going to be a superstar, in my opinion.
And by the way, I think that it's a general cliche to say, oh, said player needs a creative defensive coordinator. A really good example of the wrong defensive coordinator getting their hands on a player who needed one was Jalen Walker this past draft. It didn't feel like they got out of him what they needed to get out of him, and he just kind of, stagnated, didn't make the jump, didn't have the impact they needed from a first-round pick. Reese does need the right situation, because I think if you just corner him at linebacker or you corner him at edge, you're not getting the full breadth of what you can build him into becoming, which is just insanely disruptive as a linebacker off ball, coming off the edge, as a blitzer. I think the most mesmerizing thing that he does is when he blitzes from the A-gap. Centers and guards don't know what to do. They're freaked out. You've got a dude who's physically capable of beating tackles off the edge, and you got to deal with him in a phone booth? No, that is not a fun experience. The deployability is what makes him frightening for opposing teams to have to deal with. I think with Reese, because of this does make him the best player in the class. Where he goes, though, will be determined on the quarterbacks and the general value of teams that are picking in the top 5 if they want to invest in a player like Reese. I think that he's not directly comparable to Parsons, as you said, but you can get a lot of similar things from him. And I think a lot of people looking back at Micah Parsons' draft class would have taken him first overall, no questions asked. He was the best player that's coming out of that class. And look at the difference that it made for the Cowboys and then now for the Packers before he suffered his season-ending injury. Getting somebody like Reese is a tipping point. He is one of those prospects that takes your team from maybe average or even bad to good or potentially elite.
I always think back to Micah Parsons' draft, because that was the COVID draft, right? Where it was like we were heavily debating on, the guy didn't play this past year. Should he still be a top 10 pick? It was like Penei Sewell and Jamar Chase and like all those guys in that bucket, which is just a fascinating thing to kind of look back on. But I really think when you talk about Arvell Reese, Joe, I think the biggest misnomer that's going to be out there, which is why people are just kind of painting him as an edge a lot of the time, is that he struggles in space. And I don't agree with that. Now, Matt Patricia uses him a lot as kind of a spy and kind of a mush rusher to be able to attack quarterbacks. But there was a couple plays early in the season, I forget what game it was, I have it written down somewhere, where he was flipping his hips in space in zone coverage and be able to make a pass breakup early in the year. There was a play against, was it Michigan, where he was dropped back into landmark like zone coverage, dropped back, noticed it was a screen, flipped his hips, and then absolutely killed the screen behind the line of scrimmage. Like, this kid is a much better space player He's much more flexible, much quicker than I think people are giving him credit for. That's why, again, I think he could do so much. But again, for me, this is my starting Mike linebacker that I'm doing a lot of creative things with. I think that is how you potentially maximize the most upside with him from a versatility perspective.